Hello guys, welcome to this session. Our topic is nutrition. So in our previous video, we're discussing about the nutrition in plants. We were discussing about the photosynthesis, also the concept of photosynthesis, the various favorable conditions for the photosynthesis to occur. So today, let's move on to the basic food substances and their properties. So here I'm going to see some of the basic food substances that the organisms they need and they are some of their properties. The basic food substances here, we're talking about the carbohydrates, the protein, and the lipids. So these are mainly the basic food substances that are required for the living things, for their growth and development. So far in this video, we'll be discussing about the carbohydrates. So let's start with this carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, this is the kind of the food substances or some of the food substances nutrients that are made up of the carbon, hydrogen, and the oxygen. So the main compositions of the carbohydrates are the carbon, hydrogen, and the oxygen. So all these are just components of these food substances or these nutrients. Now, example of the sources of the carbohydrates, they include as many as cassava, maize, rice, etc., etc. So these are just some of the sources of the carbohydrates. Moving on. Now let's see the various types of the carbohydrates. There are mainly three types of the carbohydrates. There are monosaccharides, the disaccharides, and the polysaccharides. So in this video, I'm going to discuss all three of them. Let's start with the monosaccharides. The monosaccharide is also known as the simple sugar. They include those glucose, fructose, and the galactose. So the compositions or the main uh, composing substances that are in the monosaccharides are these glucose, fructose, and the galactose. Now, these sugars are the ones that they dissolve in water and they form the sweet solutions. And the monosaccharides, they are reduced sugar. The general formula for the monosaccharide is this one, CH2O, whereby in bracket N, whereby N is just represents the number of the carbon atoms and the value between 3 and 6. Take an example, the formula of the glucose is C6H12O6. So this is what monosaccharides looks like. The monosaccharides are just the reduced sugars, and their general formula is made up of this CH2O, whereby in bracket there's N, whereby the N is just the number of the carbon atoms and have a value that is between 3 and 6. As you can see that the mainly the monosaccharides are the glucose, fructose, and the galactose. So here's just an example of the glucose. Its formula is C6H12O6. Moving on, let's see the disaccharide. The disaccharide, this is the kind of the carbohydrate which is composed or formed when the two monosaccharides molecules they combine. So from the word di, it means there are two. So disaccharides is just kind of the carbohydrate or type of the carbohydrate that is just formed or made up of the two monosaccharides that are combined together. Now the two glucose molecules they combined from the mantles. So that's the glucose are the monosaccharides. So mainly when two glucose molecules they combine, they form the mantles. This mantles is an example of the disaccharide. So as you can see here, this is just how it is that these two glucose with their formulas are C6H12O6 plus C6H12O6 in the process of condensation will result to C12H22O11 plus H2O, whereby H2O is just water molecule. Now, some disaccharides are using sugars. Take an example, the lactose and the maltose, while others are just non-reducing sugars. Take as example, the sucrose. So this is briefly about the disaccharide. Let's wrap it with the polysaccharide. The polysaccharide, this is the type of the carbohydrates that are formed by the condensation involving the several monosaccharide. Take an example, the starch, the chitin, etc., etc. So this polysaccharide just those kinds of the carbohydrates that are formed by the condensation involving several or many monosaccharides. An example is this starch. Now, the properties of the polysaccharides, they include as follows. The first one, that they are not soluble in water, so they are insoluble in water, these polysaccharides. The second one, that they are non-reducing sugars. And the third one, that they are not sweet compared to the ones which you have seen before. These monosaccharides are mainly sweet. So the polysaccharides are just not sweet because they are just typical carbohydrates that are made up of several monosaccharides. Last but not least, when these polysaccharides, when they are put in water, they form the suspension. So suspension is a kind of a mixture whereby there's viewing of some kind of suspended particles when you are trying to observe this kind of a mixture. So I hope this guys, thank you for listening. We've discussed the basic food substances for the living organisms. We said there are three of them. We've discussed mainly the carbohydrates. We've seen that there are three main types of the carbohydrates. We've briefly discussed all three of them and their properties. Thank you.